Hey everybody, I'm going to do this a little bit old school because we are having some internet issues and obviously you guys had difficulty hearing the video the other day, so I'm going to re-record the heart video and then I'm also going to record a vessel video after this and then you will have one over blood. So let me get started, okay? I just want to take a minute to tell you guys that. So we're going to start over. We're going to talk about the heart, basic anatomy and function of the heart today. So the cardiovascular system, it consists of the heart, the arteries, the veins, and your blood. The cardiovascular system's main function is transportation of blood, and blood is what everything kind of transports around. Blood is what everything transports around you. It's carried. It carries oxygen, nutrients, waste, and hormones. So please be sure you remember that blood is our transport vesicle. That's our vesicle. That's what transports the oxygen, the nutrients, the waste, and the hormones around. It's transported through tubes called vessels or veins and arteries. Blood is transported through veins and arteries. And our heart is the pump. It's actually what is pumping that blood to the rest of the body. So that's how movement is provided through the pumping action of the heart. So remember that the heart is the main pump of the cardiovascular system, which transports blood through the vessels, and it's carrying oxygen, nutrients, and waste. Oh, did I go too far? Oh, okay, so we're going to talk about the heart itself. When we look at the heart, and you'll see an image of it in here in a minute, there are 3 layers of the heart. But the outermost layer technically has 2 connected layers. So it has the outermost layer that has the 2 most connected layers. They're called the pericardium and the epicardium. And that is a membrane that surrounds the heart and protects it from other organs and also protects it from having friction against other parts of the body. So that pericardium and epicardium are very important. And in between the pericardium and the epicardium, there is serous fluid. It is a lubricating fluid that keeps the 2 membranes from sticking together. So the pericardium, peri means around, cardi means heart, and means pertaining to. So it's around the outside of the heart, the pericardium, and the epicardium is just inside the pericardium. And it is a membrane that is on the outside of the heart. It has 2 layers. Then we have the middle layer, which is the myocardium. Myo means muscle, cardi means heart, and means pertaining to. Means pertaining to. So that is the heart muscle itself. So that is where the contractile fibers, that's where the striated muscle is there in the heart, in that middle layer. That's where the actual pumping takes place. That is the actual muscle is in the middle. And then the innermost layer is the endocardium. Endo means inside. And that is what lines the chambers of the heart. You have 4 chambers to your heart, and the endocardium lines the chambers of the heart. It's actually what the blood that comes into the heart flows on. Now, if you look here, we'll see the fibrous pericardium on the outside. You can see the inside of that epicardium where that layer is folded back. That would be the epicardium. Then you're seeing the heart itself. You can really only see the heart muscle there on the bottom. That light white area is really fat tissue. And the gray, this is a sheep's heart. The gray area would actually be that myocardium or myocardium. And when people have a heart attack, we call it a myocardial infarction. Myocardial would be it's pertaining to the myocardium. So that's actual destruction and death of heart muscle. And this, you're looking at all 3 layers in this section. So that very innermost area under the red part, that would be the epicardium. That would be the endocardium. That would be the inside layer. Then the really meaty red part would be the myocardium, which is the heart muscle itself. Then we have that first white layer, which would be the epicardium. And then we have the top layer that would be the pericardium. So it has those first two layers of that outer membrane, the pericardium and the epicardium. Then we have the heart muscle itself, the red area, that meaty looking area. That would be the myocardium. And then that very thin layer just at the bottom of the meaty looking flesh would be the endocardium. And that's the part that the blood flows over. Okay, so the heart has 4 chambers. There's 2 atria, and those are at the top, and then you have 2 ventricles, and those are at the bottom. The atrium is the superior most or the uppermost part of the heart, and those are basically the receivers. They receive blood. The right side receives blood from the body, and the left side receives blood from the lungs. Blood flows into the atria for it to go into the ventricles to be pumped somewhere. So and remember that the right side of the heart has deoxygenated blood, and the left side has oxygenated blood. So the right side of the heart is going to be sending blood to the lungs. The left side will receive blood from the lungs, and it will send it out to the rest of the body. Where the right side receives blood from the rest of the body and sends it to the lungs for oxygen and to get rid of the carbon dioxide. The left side receives blood from the lungs and then pumps it out to the rest of the body. The chambers, the right and left sides of the heart are separated by a septum. A septum separates the right and left side of the heart. The upper and lower sections are separated by valves. So remember, the right and left side is separated by a septum, by something called a septum, and that's just a thick piece of tissue. And then there are valves that separate the upper and lower parts. So here we're looking at the heart, and hopefully you can see my little, well, I know you can't see my cursor, but you're going to see the superior vena cava at the very top of the heart, and that is the largest vein in the body. You have an inferior and a superior vena cava, that's at the top and the bottom. That lets blood flow from the body into the right atrium. That is deoxygenated blood. Deoxygenated blood goes from the superior vena cava into the right atrium. Then the right atrium, the tricuspid valve, opens up and allows blood to flow down into the right ventricle. The right ventricle pumps blood out into the pulmonary artery. The pulmonary artery then takes blood to the lungs, and it goes to the alveoli, where at the capillary beds around the alveoli, gas exchange happens. Oxygen comes out of the alveoli and goes into the vessels, and carbon dioxide comes out of the capillaries and goes into the alveoli for you to breathe that carbon dioxide out. Then once that blood is oxygenated, it comes back to the heart in the pulmonary veins. It goes from the pulmonary veins into the left atrium. That is oxygenated blood now on the left side at the left atrium. Then it goes down through the mitral valve or the bicuspid valve. Either one is fine. I prefer mitral though, mitral valve. Down to the left ventricle, up through the aortic valve, into the aorta, and then the aorta, which is the largest vessel in the body, takes blood to the rest. It branches out and takes blood to the rest of the body. So I want you to remember that the vena cava is the largest vein, but the aorta is the largest vessel. Okay? You will need to know all of those structures that you see on that image. You'll need to learn those structures. The pulmonary valve, the aortic valve. You'll need to learn the tricuspid and the mitral valve. You need to know all of those portions of the heart. So you have a right and a left atrium, a right and a left ventricle there. Now you're seeing, and that was a dissected section, now you're seeing the heart as a whole. So you can see that superior vena cava and the pulmonary trunk where the pulmonary vein comes out, the aorta, the left atrium, the left ventricle, the right atrium, the right ventricle from the outside. The other thing I want you to look at is you see those blood vessels, the red, the little blood vessels, the red and the blue, the arteries and the veins on the outside of the heart. Those are the only vessels that bring oxygen and nutrients and take waste and carbon dioxide away from the heart itself. So if those vessels get blocked, that's when we have heart attacks or we have strokes, when those vessels get blocked or get clogged. Okay, let's move on. So remember, deoxygenated blood goes to the lungs and it is on the right side of the heart. And oxygenated blood comes into the left side of the heart from the lungs and out to the rest of the body. So we're going to talk about pulmonary circulation. I want you to remember pulmonary circulation and systemic circulation. We're going to talk about pulmonary circulation first. And that basically means, pulmonary means lungs, so that means that the blood is going to go to the lungs. So pulmonary blood or pulmonary circulation starts with deoxygenated blood. And it involves, once again, the right side of the heart. And how blood flows, and you're going to hear this over and over because you're going to have to list it. On your test, you're going to have to tell me when blood enters the heart from the vena cava, what happens. So be learning. And there's about 10 or 12 steps to it, so be sure that you learn it. And it's just on this slide, and then it'll be on the systemic slide. You'll have to know those. So the pathway is the superior and inferior vena cava empty into the right atrium. The right atrium lets blood flow. Once the tricuspid valve opens, deoxygenated blood flows from the right atrium to the right ventricle. Then the tricuspid valve closes, and the superior and the blood in the right ventricle pumps through the pulmonary valve. You don't have to write semilunar, but pulmonary valve to the pulmonary artery. So the pulmonary valve opens up and that blood is pumped into the pulmonary artery and it takes it to the lungs. Then gas exchange happens. Oxygen is picked up and carbon dioxide is dumped off. And so now we have good oxygenated blood after the blood leaves the lungs. So if we look here, the gray is telling you that pathway. So here we have the superior and the inferior vena cava, and they empty blood into the right atrium, through the tricuspid valve, into the right ventricle, out through the pulmonary valve, to the pulmonary arteries, and then these pulmonary arteries, which you have, the pulmonary arteries take blood to the lungs. You have 4 pulmonary arteries, 2 go to each lung. Then we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about, it goes through each one of those steps. Now we're going to talk about systemic blood. Systemic blood is oxygenated. Oxygenated blood is on the left side of the heart. Be sure that you are learning all of these 10 steps, okay? Systemic blood is on, and it's oxygenated blood on the left side of the heart. So once the blood leaves, is oxygenated and it leaves the lungs, it comes back through the left pulmonary vein. It goes from the pulmonary vein empties into the left atrium. Once the left atrium is full, the bicuspid or mitral valve opens up and lets the oxygenated blood go into the left ventricle. Then the left ventricle, once it's full, the aortic valve opens, sending blood into the aorta, and then the aorta, via the pressure from the heart contraction, sends blood to the rest of the body, all of the other tissues. Learn those steps. They will be a big question on your test, and you are going to have to do that yourself. It's not going to be multiple choice. That is going to be a short answer that you have to tell me the pathway of blood. So be sure you learn those, okay? And this is that systemic blood pathway. So blood comes back to the heart, that's these red arrows, comes back to the heart from the lungs, in the pulmonary veins, from the lungs to the pulmonary veins back to the right atrium. Once the right atrium fills, then the mitral valve opens, allowing oxygenated blood to flow down into the left ventricle. The left ventricle fills and the aortic valve opens. It sends blood into the aorta and then on out to the rest of the body. I can't stress to you enough how important it is to learn all of the structures of the heart, because you will have to label those, and then how blood flows through the body. All right, guys, let me get through here. Okay, so this is just another picture of what you saw. It's got systemic circulation in red, and in blue is pulmonary circulation. It may be easier for you to learn from this image. Okay, so that starts at the capillary level and goes back to the capillary level. This is that double loop where blood goes from the capillaries into the heart, from the heart to the lungs, from the lungs back to the heart, and from the heart back to the rest of the body. That's why we call that a double loop, because we have the heart makes two loops. Okay, so that would be that double loop, pulmonary and systemic circulation. Let's talk about our valves. We have four main valves. When blood fills the atrium, then it flows, the atria, then it opens either the bicuspid or tricuspid valves. And when those shut, they open and the semilunar valves, which means the aortic valve and the pulmonary valves, close. So if the mitral valve and the tricuspid valve are open, your aortic and your pulmonary valves are closed. And then when the aortic and the pulmonary valves open, the mitral valve and the tricuspid valve close. All of the valves are never open at the same time. When the valves open and close, they should close completely. Now, if we start having an issue with our valves not closing at the right time, or not closing completely, or not working the way they should, blood can remain, or it can be ejected back up into another location. When that happens, we tend to increase the risk of blood clot in the heart, because blood will sit longer than it should. So it's very important that our valves work the way they are supposed to. When they don't, sometimes patients have to get a valve replacement. Valves can be replaced with either pig valves or with a plastic valve. So remember that only two sets of valves are open at a time. Either the mitral and the tricuspid and the mitral valve are open, or the semilunar, the aortic and the pulmonary valves are open. They are not open all at once. And there we see the valves of the heart. Okay, guys, that's it for this lecture. Be sure you took good notes. You'll have a worksheet to do over it.